Hey, what's going on? Andrew Fillion here, and today I'm taking you through a quick one. I want to tell you guys two major things that I cut out to go from looking like this to going like that. And I'm going to give you the red meat up front. It's going to be cutting out high fructose corn syrup and all forms of vegetable and seed oils. And I'm going to break these down individually. We'll start out with high fructose corn syrup. The reason I don't like high fructose corn syrup is right there in the name itself. High fructose. What this means is a mixture of a majority of fructose as high as 90%, especially when it says high fructose, you know that means it's in those upper ranges. Now, the thing about high fructose corn syrup, your body can't really use it. The fructose enters the liver and it gets metabolized into fat. No matter how hungry or depleted you are, it can't get used. It has to go to the liver no matter what. Now, in a roundabout way, sure, it could be converted back into energy using ketones, but there's a big problem. The sugar from the fructose is spiking your insulin so high that it would be hours, perhaps even days before your body enters ketosis to actually burn it off. So that right there is a big problem, but there's more to it than that people might not fully understand. I want you guys to think about something. Do you remember being a kid and you'd have Kool-Aid? You'd have your cup of Kool-Aid and you'd pour the mixture in and you stir it all up, and because we're kids, we always add extra sugar to the cup, right? Well, do you remember how at the bottom of the cup there'd be this like powdery sludge? Well, that sludge is because the sugars in the concoction only has a certain level of solubility. So when the sugar binds with a water molecule, it gets absorbed as a mixture. But when the water can no longer absorb any more sugar, that's when you get that sludge at the bottom. In a way that kind of lets us know, okay, this water is fully saturated with sugar. When it comes to high fructose corn syrup, the threshold for that is way higher. And because it's a syrup and it's not crystallized, this further exacerbates the issue because you're not going to be able to see when the sugar from the corn syrup is overburdening your drink. Now, a good representation of this would be pop or soda, depending on where you're at. It's called different things, but the key thing with it is that it's so loaded with high fructose corn syrup, you can't see how much sugar is really in it. But if you were to take that same ratio and use table sugar, I don't care what pop it is, it would have that sugar at the bottom of the glass, which means there's more than the water can even hold. You got two big problems there. First of all, you can't use the sugar because it has to go through the liver. It's fructose. And then you have just an overburdening quantity of it. It's no surprise that this gets stored as very high levels of body fat. So when I first started my true drive to get down to a lean body weight, that was the big thing that I cut. Remember, I went from this right here to that. It took a while, it really did. The thing is, I cut out high fructose corn syrup at every possible level. I got rid of anything in my house that had it in it, and I look at every food label. I make sure that nothing that I buy has high fructose corn syrup in it. Now, that doesn't mean that all sugars are going to be bad. There is a time and place for sugar, especially if you're a training athlete. But you want to make sure that sugar is something that can be used. In a perfect world, we want our carbs to be full of glucose. Glucose is what your body uses for energy, especially physical exercise. So glycogen is formulated through glucose, water, and sodium. So you need this stuff if you're going to be a high functioning athlete, but you want to get the glucose from good sources. There's another type of sugar out there called sucrose, which is a combination of one molecule of glucose and one molecule of fructose. So it's not as good as glucose, but it is actually usable. Because if you cut that 50-50, you're still getting 50% glucose out of that. Good example of that would be honey and maple syrup. Both of those are going to be a sucrose-based sugar that a lot of athletes use in order to stay energized while working out. Now, there is something that people often say, hey, fruit has fructose in it. And this is true. Fruit does have fructose, but the level of fructose in the fruit is very minuscule when you actually look at the complete package. Most fruits are a majority water, also high in fiber. The fructose that's in fruit is so minuscule that it really doesn't make a big difference. A good frame of reference for this would be 10 strawberries is maybe only 40 to 45 calories, depending on the size of the strawberry. So if you think about trying to get a lot of calories out of strawberries, you'd have to be eating 50, 60, even more than that. It's just not feasible. It's just not going to happen, especially with other berries like blueberries, blackberries, things of this nature, even cucumbers. They're just not going to have enough fructose in them to cause you any real damage, but the high fructose corn syrup will. It was formulated that way by design. See, it triggers the dopamine levels in your brain to such high degrees that it makes you want to continue eating. This is good for the food companies because it means that you'll buy more, you'll consume more, and this cycle continues. If you get this out of your diet completely, and I mean 100%, you can make incredible changes without even having to track. Now, eventually, as you get leaner, you do want to end up tracking eventually, but making the small change of cutting out anything with high fructose corn syrup in it, whether it's pop, candy, you name it, that's going to do a lot for you guys. And it doesn't matter if you're cutting or bulking either. If you're on a cut, obviously these things are going to be a big deal. But if you're bulking, you want to make sure that you're still getting good nutrients from your food, especially with the increase in calories. If you're going to bulk on a bunch of junk food that's going to have high fructose corn syrup in it, recipe for disaster because your body can't use it. Try to get high fructose corn syrup out of your diet as much as you possibly can. It's going to go a very long way at helping you get to your goal. Now let's get to that second one. This one's a little bit more malicious. It's a lot harder to see in your food. It's going to be the vegetable and seed oils. The most common one that you're going to see is soybean oil, but that's not the only one that's a problem. Canola oil is a big one. Safflower seed oil is a big one. Sunflower seed oil is a big one. You want to think about how these foods look in their natural state. How do they turn into an oil? In most cases, especially with soybeans. I mean, a soybean is a green leafy vegetable. For that to turn into an oil, it has to go through an incredible assembly line of different stages to go from a leafy green vegetable to a translucent oil. It's just not natural. And this goes for all the other ones as well. Sunflower seed oil, canola oil. None of these things are good. And I want to ask you, what is a canola? Does the common person even really know? I bring that up because canola oil is a lot of times used as a lubricant for things like your cookware, like a pan, or other metals. So somehow this got turned into a food. I just don't understand. You don't want to have these seed oils in because they're extremely inflammatory. It's going to trigger responses in your body that are moving you away from your goal, which is, either cutting weight or putting on muscle. When your body's all inflamed, now you're in defense mode trying to deal with the inflammation as opposed to having a well-regulated machine, which is your body. Your body is a machine. If you cut these things out, especially the seed oils because they're so high in inflammatories, you can make a lot of good progress. Now, not all oils are bad. Olive oil and coconut oil, two pretty common and popular things. I'm still not a big fan of them, and I'll explain why. When you add an oil to your food, it disappears. You can't see how much you've put in once it's in the food. This is especially true for things like dips and salads. And a lot of the times, it gets comboed up with a lot of starchy carbs like breads and rice. It's a recipe for disaster if you're trying to cut. Now, if you are bulking, some people will say this is a good way to get your calories up. But in my opinion, too many calories means too much body fat, which means you're just going to have to cut more weight at the end of your bulk. I just don't see it being worth it. If you want to have fat in your diet, looking at things like beef tallow, which is made from beef. So if you've got ground beef, if you store that liquid, that's beef tallow. Same goes for lard, that's pork. So if you're making pork belly or bacon, that grease, if you save it in a mason jar, becomes lard. And of course, fish is always a really great option too. Everybody wants to get their fish oils, right? Why not get them from the food you eat? So I like to have a diet comprised of a lot of fatty meats. We're looking at beef, pork, especially fish. I'm a big fan of sardines and salmon myself. I try to have those at some point in the day, every single day. On top of that, whole eggs, you can't go wrong. Think about the egg for a second. It's the foundation of life, right? Like if that egg got fertilized by a rooster and it wasn't sterile, because like all the eggs are sterile these days, but the point being, that would become life. The egg is a self-contained ecosystem that has all the nutrients to grow a new living, breathing animal. So eggs, totally cool in my book. I don't really buy into the whole egg white thing. I want to have the fat for my eggs. But to wrap this all up, it doesn't matter if you're cutting or bulking. High fructose corn syrup and seed oils, when combined, is a recipe for weight gain, and not the kind of weight that you want to gain. We're looking at a lot of visceral body fat, not muscle. So whether you're cutting or bulking, try to eliminate these things out of your diet as much as you possibly can. And with that, guys, I'm going to start wrapping things up, but I want to hear from you. Please let me know in the comments below what you struggle with, and I'll make sure that I get back to you to help you troubleshoot your problem. Aside from that, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. All of these things help me grow the channel and get more exposure so that I can help more people. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.